Good morning, dear students. Today we are going to continue with the 10th chapter of our English course book, A Strange Transformation. In the previous class, I have explained you all the half of the chapter. In today's class, we are going to study the remaining half of the chapter. So, in the previous half, we will have a quick revision of what we have studied in the previous half of the chapter. So one morning, the main protagonist of this chapter is Gregor Samsa, and one day Gregor Samsa wakes up and he finds himself changed into or transformed into a huge monstrous bug. And while he was changed into a huge monstrous bug, he thought he was dreaming and he thought of going back to sleep so that he could get back from his dream and change him to his real self. But when he was trying to move to the right position of his bed, he was unable to move because he used to roll back to his present position. And while doing all this thing, while trying to roll over to the right position of the bed, he felt a huge immense amount of pain in his neck, and he thought that this pain was because of the constant traveling he used to do, as he was a salesperson, as he was a salesman, and the constant traveling and all constant threat of constant tension of the train connectivity, food, and all those things have caused such a stress over him. And he also kept on thinking that someday after he repays all the debts of his parents, after which would take around 5 to 6 years, he would leave his job and get his break, and he would tell his boss whatever he feels about him. Now after all this thinking, he thinks that looks at his alarm clock, and he sees that it was around 6:30 a.m. in the morning, and as he had already set an alarm for 4 o'clock, so he looks at the alarm and thinks that the alarm might have not rang. But when he sees at the alarm clock, he sees that the alarm was set at 4 o'clock, and it surely rang, but he was unable to hear it as he was in a deep sleep. Now he kept on thinking that he will catch the next train, which was at 7 o'clock, but it was already a quarter to 7, so he was already too late, and for catching the next train he should be in a mad rush. Now we'll start from here, the sample collection. Okay, the sample collection wasn't picked up yet, and he really didn't feel particularly fresh and active, and even if he caught the train, there was no avoiding a blow up with the manager. Okay, now Gregor was asked to collect a sample. You know what is a sample? A small piece sample कि हाँ ये देख लेते हैं कि ये प्रोडक्ट कैसा होगा, तो छोटा सा प्रोडक्ट का छोटा सा हिस्सा, ठीक है, सैम्पल होता है वो. तो sample, he was asked to collect a sample, and he had not picked up the sample, and that day he was not feeling fresh and active. And even though he was thinking that even though I catch the train of 7 o'clock, but he would surely get a very good scolding from his manager. As he was thinking all this over in the great test haze, without being able to make the decision, get out of the alarm clock was indicating exactly quarter to 7. Okay, now all these thoughts were coming to his mind, that how you would, if you wanted to catch the train of 7 o'clock, how you would do all those things, and he need to collect the sample and all those things, and he was not able to decide what he should do. And in the alarm clock, the time was quarter to 7, मतलब 6:45 हो रहे थे. There was a cautious knock on the door by the head of the bed. Okay, now his bed in his room, his bed was set beside the door of his room, so there was a very cautious, fast knock, sincere knock in the door of his room. Gregor, a voice called. It was his mother. It's quarter to 7. Don't you want to be in your way? Now his mother was calling from outside the room by knocking at the door, that Gregor, it's already quarter to 7, and don't you want to go to your office and catch your train, as you are already late? Gregor was startled when he heard his voice answering. It was clearly and unmistakably his earlier voice, but in it was intermingled as if from below a painful squeaking. Okay, now when Gregor tried to answer his mother, so when he was answering his mother, he was very much shocked to hear his voice, because it was his voice, it was clearly his voice, but his voice had mixed with a painful squeaking. मतलब एकदम ऐसी आवाज़, उसकी आवाज़ ही थी वो, लेकिन ऐसा लग रहा था उसकी आवाज़ एक बहुत ही दर्दनाक आवाज़ के साथ मिक्स कर दी गई है, और फिर उसकी आवाज़ निकल रही है. ठीक है, सो ही वॉज वेरी मच शॉक टू हियर हिज ओन वॉइस. Gregor wanted to answer in detail and explain everything, but yes, Gregor wanted to answer in detail and explain everything, but in these circumstances, he confined himself to saying, actually, yes, yes, thank you, mother, I'm getting up right away. Okay, now when his mother questioned him that you aren't you getting late or something like that, so Gregor wanted to tell his mother everything and explain everything, but in the type of condition he was, he stopped himself and he just replied that actually yes, yes, thank you, mother, I'm getting up. It was very easy to throw aside the blanket. He needed only to push himself up a little and it fell by itself. But to continue was difficult, particularly because he was so unusually wide. Okay. So to keep his blanket aside, it was very easy to keep his blanket aside because he only needed to push himself a little and his blanket would fall itself aside. Okay. But standing up and getting up from the bed was difficult because he was so wide. He was very much fat and he has turned into extremely wide. He needed arms and hands to put himself upright. Okay. Instead of this, however, he had only small limbs which were moving continuously with different motion and which in addition he was unable to control. Okay, so to get up from the bed he needed arms and hands to keep himself straight, but instead of that he had only few thin limbs matlab legs, ठीक है, and these limbs were continuously moving in different directions and he was also unable to control his limbs. If he wanted to bend one of them, the first limb extended itself and he finally succeeded doing this with this limb what he wanted. In the meantime, all the other, as it left free, moved around in excessively pain agitation. Okay. So if he wanted to bend one of his legs, so what he used to do, first he needed to extend, उसको पहले फैलाना पड़ता था, फिर वो जाके कहीं थोड़ा सा झुकता था या टेढ़ा होता था। तो जब वो एक पैर जब टेढ़ा होता था या बेंड होता था, उस ड्यूरेशन में बाकी के पैर बहुत ही ज़्यादा पेनफुली यहाँ वहाँ मूव करते थे। But I must not stay in bed uselessly, said Gregor to himself, even though he was unable to get himself out of the bed, but still Gregor thought that I must not stay in the bed uselessly. Okay. As Gregor was in the process of lifting himself half out of bed, it struck him how easily all this would be if someone were to come to his aid. Now, quite apart from the fact that the doors were locked, should he really call out for help? Okay. Now, Gregor was thinking that getting out of the bed would have been very easy if someone would come to help him. Okay. But the door of his room was locked and nobody could come for his help unless and until he opens the door. So he was thinking that should I really call for help from someone? Then there was a ring at the door of the apartment. That someone from the office, he told himself. Then there was a ring at that room at the door of his apartment. At his house there was a ring. Okay, and as soon as there was a ring, he thought that this might be someone who has come from my office. They aren't openings, Gregor said to himself, caught up in some absurd hope. Okay, so the person who was standing at the door of his was constantly ringing the doorbell, and Gregor said to himself that they are not opening the door, and still Gregor was thinking about some absurd, was engrossed in some absurd hope, some useless hope. Okay, but of course, then, as usual, the servant girl with her firm tread went to door and opened it. But after some time, what happened? The servant girl means helping hand or the person maid. Okay, she went to the door and she opened it. Gregor needed to hear only the visitor's first word of greeting to recognize immediately who it was, the manager itself. So as soon as the maid opened the door and as soon as Gregor heard the first word of the visitor, he was able to recognize who the person it was. It was the manager of Gregor. Gregor swung himself with all his might out of the bed. There was a loud thud, but not a real crash. The fall was absorbed somewhat by the carpet. So as soon as Gregor heard the first words of the manager and he recognized that it was the manager, then Gregor forcefully got him out of the bed with all his power, and as soon as he got himself outside of the bed, there he fell down on the floor with a loud thud. But the sound of his falling was absorbed by the carpet. But he had not held his head up with sufficient care and had hit it. Okay. But Now when Gregor fell down, he tried to raise his head, but he was as soon as he raised his head, he had hit his head by something. He turned his head, irritated in pain, and rubbed it in the carpet. So when he hit his head, he moved his head, and he was slightly irritated, annoyed, and angry, and he started rubbing his head in the carpet. Something has fallen in there, said the manager in the next room. Now, who have arrived in that house? The manager has arrived. So, when Gregor fell down, there was a very huge noise of Gregor falling down. Okay. So, the manager, when heard this noise, he said that something has fallen in that room. He said this to the maid. Okay. I hope you all are able to understand this chapter. Thank you. Have a nice day.